All right, we are glad you're here this morning. You are a kiddo and up to the age of fourth grade. We invite you now to be dismissed back there with Kaylin, some white, bright red children's ministry shirts. If you guys want to go have some cool teaching in the back, she has worked hard to prepare something good for the children. So now's the time to do that. As always, you're welcome to stay in here. You know what's interesting about that is we never give opportunity to say, if you're an adult and you don't have a kid but you want to go to the kids ministry, we don't want to do that because half the room might leave and be like, well, better not. So, welcome to New Heights. We have a lot ahead for today. We decided we were going to study through the book of Joshua last summer, at the beginning of the summertime and through the summer, and we started it this fall. And you're here today, and we're in Joshua 9 and 10, so you can see how far along we've come. And whenever you do a book study like this, it's really difficult to read the entire thing, right? And so as I've been preparing for today, Joshua 9 and 10, there's so much there that there could easily be 5 to 6 different sermons. So we're going to do 5 to 6 different sermons this morning. Man, tough crowd. We should just pray and sing I Surrender All and go home, right? No, actually, what we're going to do today is something completely different. And the reason we're going to do this is because I inquired of the Lord. Something's not coming together when it comes to writing this sermon. I would get going on a good direction and think, man, this is going to be so good. It's so good for me. It's going to be so good for our body. It's going to just challenge us. It's going to do lots of good things. But then I was like, I hit a wall. Nope, not that way. Nope, not that way. And so really what it came down to is we're going to verse by verse read our text this morning. And I'm going to do my best to limit comments and observations. We're going to let the Word speak to us today. Not that we don't ever want to accomplish that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying we're going to do it right today. We've been doing it wrong. What I'm saying is we're going to do it different today. So we've got a lot of reading ahead of us. We've got a lot we're going to look at. I hope you came prepared today with a Bible. If not, it's going to be up there, but sometimes that's kind of hard to see. Something about having it in front of you, too. So I encourage you, as your pastor, when you come to church, bring your Bible. You want to get used to the electronic versions of things, because sometimes those things fail. In classic New Heights, it would be nothing if the projector didn't work one morning. So you always want to be prepared. Kind of in just a quick setup, we find ourselves, and Nathan mentioned this in Joshua chapter 9 and 10, the Israelites are in the promised land. They're in Canaan, promised land. And as we've already seen, the promised land wasn't just full of promises, it was also full of problems, right? Isn't that true for our lives as well? It seems like we have lots of God's promises, but we also have problems that are mixed in those promises. Do you know, oftentimes it's the problems that help us appreciate the promises more so. And I think we see that in our text. So we have Joshua, who is the leader of the Israelite people. Moses has died. And Joshua's taken leadership, and some really cool things have taken place. The flooded Jordan River stopped flowing, and they got to cross over on dry land. They get in there, they send spies in to check out Jericho, and the spies come back and say, yeah, we got this. This is going to be really cool. We can take them. We are militarily able to take them. And then we see the cooler thing happen where it really wasn't a military effort that helped them overtake Jericho. It was simply marching in a parade-type fashion consistently for 7 days and then screaming, and then the walls fell down. But another cool thing, if you remember, all of the wall didn't fall down. Most of the wall fell down, but there was a section of the wall that had a house built into it with a lady with a terrible name, Rahab the prostitute. You guys remember that? She's known for that forever. Rahab the prostitute, she was saved inside that destruction. So almost all of the walls of Jericho fell except her house stood and she was safe. That's pretty cool. And then we see it really cool as they continue to advance. But then we come upon problems. Israelites, like most people, we desire to follow God and do it right, but at times we mess up. We have blunders. And there's this guy named Achan. If you were here that Sunday, it's not so great. He coveted some things that were devoted to destruction, and hid him in his house. And whenever Israel was feeling really good, and we're going to go take Ai, we're going to conquer it, we've got this, we're more than they are, we're going to get this, and they end up 36 men getting killed just like that, 36 Israelites. And if you were here that Sunday, Mark Hansen posed the question, what happens when God doesn't fight for you? He wasn't fighting for them because one person led his portion of the family into sin to covet things that God said you can't have. And we as people don't like to hear that, do we? We don't like to say things we can and cannot do. There's just something that wells up and I was like, oh yeah? Tell me no, I'm going to go after it. We were wired that way, and so were these people. And so Achan had to be dealt with. And if you were here for that teaching, dealt with wasn't a slap on the hand or get rid of him and let's go on. It cost he and his family their life. So a picture is emerging outside of who God is on the inside as we're studying Joshua. And it is not popular in our post-Christian culture. I mean, we have a view of God who He's gracious, yes. Who He loves us, yes. Who He's given us promises, yes. But He's also just. And in God and His justice sometimes costs life. And yes, the life of not just evil men, but also women, children, as we see. And this is a hard teaching. Don't get me wrong. It is hard. I think we well get our sin and the impact that it has. If we could do like quick raise of hands of maybe in this room, if you've never really felt the impact of sin, no one would raise their hand. You've all felt it. We all know what it feels like to be in the wrong. We all know, probably, using broad terms here, but I would assume we all understand what it is like to be on the wrong side of God. We get that. But you know what I don't think we get? I don't think we totally, fully get and embrace and accept God's justice. He doesn't sweep things under the rug. He doesn't overlook things. He doesn't pretend like things of destruction and evil don't exist. Even in our minds, if we think good, God can't overlook those things because He's just. And I don't know about you, but as I've been studying this and trying to wrap my small mind, my small vision and view of God around this idea that God somehow finds it okay to have mass death and destruction, to try to wrap my head around that, it's okay when I think about it from God being just. He has to. He can't do anything other than be just. You know what? That's good news for us. Because how would it be if God would let things slide? I know me, and I think I probably know you as well. If we knew there was a possibility that God would let things slide through, we would give Him things to slide through now, wouldn't we? We would do that. And so what we find is the Israelites faced a difficult decision of having to kill one of their own because they sinned. That's pretty harsh, isn't it? Do you know what? As you think about it in the big picture, we all have that death sentence, don't we? And because Jesus came, we also get life if we surrender to Him this side of eternity. Which that's great news. But still, death is involved. Because we have sinned, and that has to be dealt with because God is just. So praise God that He is just. Something that's been really cool that I've noticed is God has led the Israelites so far. He led them out of Egypt into something else. And that's been so refreshing to me because that's the God that we're studying, the God that we've worshiped today, the God that you think about hopefully throughout the week, the God that's described in this word here, that He's the same God that leads us out of things only to lead us into something else. God doesn't just lead us out and say, all right, good luck, figure it out. He didn't do that at all with the Israelites, and He doesn't do that with us. You guys know the Israelites said, why did you lead us out here just to kill us? It's not going like we thought it should. And unfortunately, for an entire generation, it didn't go right. But God still, His plan and His justice, led them out of Egypt to lead them into the Promised Land. And as we study today, we're going to see that Moses, and I don't know where I missed this, but Moses in Deuteronomy actually gave this game plan and wrote out step 1, step 2, step 3, in a sense, of what the Israelites are supposed to do once they cross into the Promised Land. So actually, everything that takes place that we're going to study today, minus the deception, Moses kind of wrote it out for him. He's like, okay, here, by these two mountains, do this. And we're going to look at this here in a minute. But I don't know if you're like, man, I missed that. I was like, okay, they're in the promised land. They're listening to God. He's leading them. Actually, they actually had blueprints that Moses, this incredible leader, wrote for them. So why was Joshua called to be the leader of Israel? If you remember, we started this study because Joshua had a healthy guide of being mentored and discipled by Moses. He showed up. He knew God and His Word. So it wasn't because Joshua was a great fighter. It wasn't any of those things other than God had prepared Joshua to lead these people. And that's what He did. And that's pretty exciting. As we see they're getting into conquer the land, and as it goes, Jericho was the first city that they'd have to conquer, followed by Ai, and then followed by this place called Gibeon as they travel into Canaan. All right? And so we see where we find ourselves today that the Jericho destruction went pretty flawless, went well, not conventional, I'll give you that. It wasn't guns and arrows and torches and all those things. It was trumpets and parades and walls falling down and confusion and mass destruction of evil people. I think I forgot to mention this, but can I reground us really quickly? Whenever we continue on through our study in Joshua and we see this mass genocide of people, to me it was helpful if I knew what they were doing. Like, they're really bad. They're killing, sacrificing babies and children. They're the worst of the worst. To me, that was always helpful, kind of justify God's move. But as I've studied this a little more, I don't think that's the right posture. I think the right posture as we look at and handle and deal with what's in front of us is we have to trust to be okay with a God who's just. Whether we know what He's doing or not fully, we trust Him. And we trust Him because He saw that all these people had to be wiped out. That's hard, isn't it? It's easier if we know they were all bad and deserved it. But in essence, what we have in front of us is an entire land of people that were put on death row by the righteous judge, God, who convicted them to such. It's hard teaching. And so I just want to challenge you, like I've been challenged, not to try to figure out, is God justified in what He did based on what all we can find out about the people in Canaan? Moses even told them, don't make alliances with them. Don't make promise treaties with them because they will lead your children astray from God. That's helpful to know. That's a good reason to wipe people out, right? But even if we didn't know that, are we okay with knowing and trusting a God who makes difficult decisions, who doesn't often make sense? Are we okay with that? Can we just sit in that for a minute together? Are we okay? Are you okay with a God who's really just? He's going to make decisions at times that you just may not agree with or understand. Are you okay with that? So before we jump into the last part of chapter 8 and reading through this, I want us to pray together and be reminded what God said to Joshua, as recorded in 7:12. He says, I will not be with you anymore unless you destroy whatever among you is devoted to destruction. That's really our call today, even as the people of God. Anything that in us is devoted to destruction, anything in us that is in opposition to God. The Israelites were told that He would not be with them. He won't be there. We also know the psalmist in 66:18, Psalm 66:18 said, if I cherish sin in my heart, the Lord would not have listened. These aren't very fun teachings, are they? But that's a just God. We have to get on His terms. We don't drag Him into our terms. We get on His terms. And so that's my prayer as we look into this tough teaching today, that we freely go into the terms of God. So let's pray together, Lord. Thank you so much that we get to gather around your name today, around your word. Lord, I pray specifically that you are known well today. God, that we will step aside with our preconceived desires and notions and even experiences, especially experiences, Lord, and we'll allow you to speak as your people. God, I pray individually for those that are here today, through the power of your Spirit, that your word will land and plant and take root. This is tough teaching. It doesn't feel good, Lord. It doesn't even feel right at times. But God, you are good and you are right, and remind us of that as we study your word today. So, Father, we need you. I need you, God. I don't want to say things out of my own thoughts, but only through the Spirit. So we surrender to speak and hear from only you in Jesus' name. Amen. So if you have your Bible, look in Joshua chapter 8, and we're going to look at 30 through 35. And last week, Joshua is where we were, but I want to just remind us and kind of set the stage for this. And here's what it says. And Joshua built on Mount Ebal an altar to the Lord, the God of Israel, as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded the Israelites. It was at that moment when I read that, and it hit me. I was like, wait, Moses told them to do this? Moses is dead. What in the world? And so I started digging it out. And Moses gave a ton of instruction. He was a busy guy before he died. He's had 40 years of been grumbling. He's like, okay, I'll do this on the side whenever they're doing that. I don't know about that. But Moses wrote lots of details for these people, which is pretty awesome. It's almost like having the Word of God to follow. It was a joke. Okay, never mind. Thank you. I have to say it was a joke. It's not funny. He built it according to what is written in the book of the law of Moses, an altar of uncut stones of which no iron tool had been used. On it, they offered the Lord burnt offerings and sacrificed fellowship offerings. There in the presence of the Israelites, Joshua wrote on the stones a copy of the law. And if you jumped over to Deuteronomy 27, you'd see that there were these stones, and then they covered it in this plaster stuff. So Deuteronomy 27 says, and then they wrote it in the plaster. So I'm thinking, how long would this take to like chisel that in there? So it was interesting to find out there's actually some plaster covered thing going on. Deuteronomy 27, if you want to look at that some other time, it's kind of interesting. So they're in the presence of all the Israelites, verse 32. Joshua wrote on the stones a copy of the law of Moses. All the Israelites with their elders, officials, and judges were standing on both sides of the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, facing the Levitical priests who carried it. Both the foreigners living among them, I love that because that's Rahab and her family. That's cool, right? Foreigners living among them and the native born were there. Half of the people stood in front of Mount Gerizim and half of them in front of Mount Ebal, as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had formally commanded when he gave instruction to bless the people of Israel. This is prescribed. It's almost like prophecy being fulfilled. It's so cool. Verse 34, afterward Joshua read all the words of the law, the blessings and the curses, just as it is written in the book of the law. There was not a word of all that Moses had commanded that Joshua did not read to the whole assembly of Israel, including the women and children and the foreigners who lived among them. So that's what landed me to do what we're doing today. These people actually read and heard every piece of the law that Moses had wrote. And then they had this cool responsive worship time to it. This whole title is called The Covenant Renewed. It's what my Bible titles that section. And so today, perhaps as we read, we have a renewal in us, which is exciting to think. So while that is taking place, they're having these mountaintop experiences, right? They're full of the Lord. They're writing laws on stones, and people are agreeing, and everybody's excited about the law of the Lord. There's unity, and that feels good, right? These people are having a great worship time. And as that's taking place, chapter 9. Now, when all the kings west of the Jordan heard about these things, the kings in the hill country and the western foothills along the entire coast of the Mediterranean Sea, as far as Lebanon, the kings of the Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, they came together to wage war against Joshua and Israel. You got to think, can you imagine me and Joshua at this time? They didn't just come to wage war against Israel, Joshua and Israel. It was personal. It was hard being a leader. Joshua felt that. He was called out by name. We're coming after you, big boy, and all the people with you. That's a tough job to have. So all these people, these powerful people, these aren't just little nobodies. These are powerful people. And so while this worship is taking place and they're excited about the law, and yes, God is fulfilling promises, we are doing what Moses wrote out for us to do. This is good. This is right. Behind the scenes in the world, some ugly is taking place. Some ugly is forming. And can I just bring this up today, just with a comment and observation? As you and I are in this place this morning, and we're seeking to worship God, and we're seeking to know this diverse and complex God that allows us to call him Father. As we're in here doing this, there is out there where the enemy is also working to trip up what we're doing in here. And so, punchline, get ready. Anytime the Lord wants to work in your life, and you have one of those mountaintop experiences, or he meets you in some of those areas that are really difficult, and you're convinced of your faith in Jesus, you can expect and be ready for attack. And that's what's happening here. We see that. But then there's some interesting deception that takes place. And you know, deception is so tricky. Lies are one thing. I think deception is a whole different level of lies. Because deception, to me, has this bits and pieces that could be true. Right? A lie's a lie. You can usually just call it out. But deception's tricky when you really boil it down. It's like, could that be true? And I may be trying to split hairs here, but to me, deception seems harder than just a flat-out lie. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. Nathan mentioned it, and I'll study it. Verse 3, however, so we got worship, we got war being waged, and the funny thing is, I'm trying not to use too much, it's funny what will help people to rally, huh? As far as we know, these 5 people, these 5 kings in these 5 different lands, they weren't friends. They didn't get together and have, town-wide potlucks and things. They were most likely enemies, because that's what happens when people exist, right? So the craziest thing that united them was to come up against the Word of God. What do you think about that in our context? Dude, it's so crazy what will rally, what people will rally around and rally for. And we see that taking place. Then we have these Gibeonites, which, quite honestly, I think they're brilliant, by the way. Here's why. However, when the people of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, remember that. They've heard about those 2 places. They resorted to a ruse. What a fun word. They went as a delegation whose donkeys were loaded with worn-out sacks and old wineskin, cracked and mended. All right, when my oldest son, he's 22 now, was growing up, he loved Barney. Barney was all about imagination, right? Yes, of course. Rebecca had a purple Barney scarf on. I appreciate that. She's like, yeah, I love Barneys. Anyway, you may not. But I want you to use your imagination as we're reading this. Try to picture this because it's a brilliant story, okay? There's so much to learn. Their donkeys, they were loaded with worn-out sacks and old wineskins, cracked and mended. Verse 5, they put worn and patched sandals on their feet and wore old clothes. All the bread of their supply was dry and moldy. Then they went to Joshua in the camp of Gilgal and said to him and the Israelites, pretty gutsy if you ask me, we have come from a distant country, make a treaty with us. That doesn't seem fishy at all, right? Context, quick context. The Israelites had just finished reading everything that Moses wrote to them, both blessings and cursings. Part of the curse in there, don't make a treaty with people in Canaan. Don't do it. They will lead your family astray. They will lead them away from God Almighty. Don't do it. Isn't this funny how immediately these people show up and we come from a distant country, make a treaty? You'd think, following an incredible worship experience, a red flag would have went off, and it kind of did, as we're going to see here, and they'd be like, well, something doesn't seem right. Let's see what happens. So they say, make a treaty with us. Verse 7, the Israelites said to the Hivites, but they didn't know they were Hivites. They thought they're from a distant country. They said this, but perhaps you live near us. Man, why did they even have to say that? Because now this makes it worse for them. So how can we make a treaty with you? Verse 8, now is where it gets super tricky. Lots of deception, lots of flattery. Verse 8, we are your servants, they said to Joshua. But Joshua asked, who are you? Where do you come from? It's funny, they never really say. They do say this, your servants have come from a very distant country because of the fame of the Lord your God. Ding, 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 right? Use the right Christianese words and you're going to get what you need. For we have heard reports of him, all that he did in Egypt, notice that, and all that he did to the 2 kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan. What side of the Jordan? East. Where are they now? West. Pay close attention. East of the Jordan, to Sihon, king of Heshbon, and Og, king of Bashan, who reigned in Ashtaroth. All of this is east of the Jordan. These people are brilliant. They didn't say, we heard what happened in Jericho and just down the road here in Ai, because had they said that, the ruse would have been up. They couldn't have had knowledge of those two recent exploits in the Promised Land because they were from such a distant country, they didn't even know about that yet. Isn't that brilliant? Deception is so crazy. So had they tipped off and said, yeah, we know what happened here, make a treaty, Joshua would be like, oh no, there's only one way you can know that, and that's if you're from here. Just for context, Gibeon is about 15 to 20 miles from where they were here. So when you're on foot, that's a long way, but not long enough for news to travel. So they're going historical here, saying we've heard about how great your God is. It worked for Rahab. Maybe it'll work for us, right? They don't bring it up today. And then they also start using flattery about the Lord your God. We know. And maybe part of them believe that. But as far as we know right now, the Gibeonites, all they know is we're next. If we don't get some kind of treaty with Joshua and the Israelites, we're done. So that's what's driving them. We'll see how it turns out. Verse 11, and our elders and all those living in our country said to us, take provisions for your journey, go and meet them and say to them, we are your servants, make a treaty with us. This bread of ours lies, right? They always compound. This bread of ours was warm when we packed it at home on the day we left and came to you. Now see how dry and moldy it is. And these wineskins that were filled were new. You see how cracked they are. And our clothes and sandals are worn out by our very long journey. Here's the fall of it. Verse 14, chapter 9. The Israelites, including Joshua, sampled their provisions, but did not inquire of the Lord. Two things there. I don't know if that means they tasted the moldy bread and said, yeah, you're right, that's gross. Or they just kind of, probably were like, man, your shoes are worn out. You have walked a long way. This bread was hot and now it's crusty and moldy. How long does that take to happen? How long does it take for a wineskin to wear out? I don't know. Maybe it depends on use. I'm not familiar with all that, but it was convincing proof. Do you guys notice what they did not do though? They did not consult of the Lord. So here's what happens. Then Joshua, because he didn't inquire of the Lord, any of them, then Joshua made a treaty of peace with them and let them live. And the leaders of the assembly ratified it by an oath. Everybody got on board. This is great. It looks real. It must be. Let's make a treaty with them. Go on. 3 days after they made the treaty, the Gibeonites, with the Gibeonites, the Israelites heard that they were neighbors living near them. So the Israelites set out on the third day, came to their cities. These words are so fun. Gibeon and Kiphrah, Beeroth, and Kiriath Jearim. But the Israelites did not attack them because the leaders of the assembly had sworn an oath to them by the Lord, the God of Israel. There's another reason it's good that our God is just. He keeps his word. And as men and women of the Lord, we have to keep our word. And Joshua led the assembly to do that. But the whole assembly grumbled against the leaders. Verse 19, but all the leaders answered, we have given them our oath by the Lord of God of Israel, and we cannot touch them now. This is what we'll do to them. We'll let them live so that God's wrath will not fall on us for breaking an oath we swore to them. They continued to let them live, but let them be woodcutters and water carriers in the service of the whole assembly. So the Lord leader's promise to them was kept. Then Joshua summoned the Gibeonites and said, why did you deceive us by saying we live a long way from you, while actually you live near us? Verse 23, you are now under a curse. You will never be released from service as woodcutters and water carriers, notice this, for the house of my God. What is the house of God? Eventually it's going to be, these people got cursed to serving in the temple, which actually turns out pretty cool. We'll talk about that in a minute. Then Joshua answered, your servants were clearly told how the Lord your God had commanded his servant Moses to give you the whole land and to wipe out all of its inhabitants from before you. So we feared for our lives because of you, and that is why we did this. We are now in your hands. Do to us whatever seems good and right to you. So Joshua saved them from the Israelites, did not kill them. That day he made the Gibeonites woodcutters and water carriers for the assembly to provide for the needs of the altar of the Lord at the place the Lord would choose. And that is what they do to this day. So a couple observations from that. Deception is tricky because for us, deception comes in three ways. The enemy, that's his native tongue lying and deception. That's what the Bible says. The enemy, that's what he desires to do, is to deceive us all. So number one, we have to watch for deception from our enemy. Number two, we have to watch for deception for people who cooperate with the enemy, right? And number 3, we have to watch for deception from ourselves. 1 John, I've been studying through 1 John for a couple of months. I just don't feel like I can quite grasp all of it yet, so I just am staying there. The part of it says, if any of you claim to be without sin, you lie, and have you ever caught this, and deceive yourself? It's easier to say, Satan deceived me, or this individual deceived me. It's really hard and humbling to say, perhaps I'm deceiving myself. So we have to be so careful when it comes to deception because it's coming at us from every single way. We cannot trust ourselves when it comes to matters of truth. There has to be something more. These Israelites had a great experience in worshiping God, and they relied on that experience at the expense of not consulting Him, and then they maybe treated with people they should not have ever done. They were so full of worship and the afterglow of a spiritual experience that they missed the obvious. But we can't judge them too harshly, can we? Because how many times do we do that? How many times have you done that? How many times have I done that? You know, I had a very quiet time. I've really worshiped well. I'm praying well. I've got this thing figured out. When all the time, we got to inquire of the Lord. So if you leave here today and you don't remember much of anything, remember this. The truth of what they didn't do here, that we applied what we should do, impacts every second of our entire days and life. Is we should constantly be people who inquire of the Lord. That's why we're reading verse by verse, because as I inquired of him, he said read verse by verse. I'm like, no, they're going to get bored. And you might be. I'm sorry. I just inquired of the Lord, and he said read it verse by verse. What does he have to say to you when you inquire? Was this a small thing? No, it was a huge thing. Do you know what's so beautiful about it? We're about to read it. Is even in our worst blunders, hear this, even in our worst blunders, God has the capacity, and oftentimes he does turn those into great blessings. So we have to let our blunders kind of work for us. These Gibeonites, they deceived. Yeah, they did. Was it right? No, it was wrong. But as we see, as it turns out, do you guys know who helped rebuild the wall in the story of Nehemiah? The Gibeonites. I have to imagine that was a strategic move of the Lord to put them in service of the altar where sacrifices were made. I have to believe these people came to a saving faith in God Almighty. They were just indoctrinated with it. So really what was meant for curse actually probably turned out pretty well for some of them. We have no record at all of the Gibeonites rebelling against the Israelites. There's no record of it. That's pretty cool. So even in the biggest blunder, God has greatest capacity and desire to make it into a blessing. And if we took the time right now, you could think of some big blunders in your life, right? I can. But inquire of the Lord and see what he won't do with those. And it's not a one-time thing. It's not the mountaintop thing, because then we get arrogant. Be careful when you think you're standing, what does it say, lest you fall. Be careful. And that's what the Israelites didn't do, but we get to learn from them. Let's move on. Some really cool things that happen here. We're going to make it, you guys. Now Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, chapter 10, heard that Joshua had taken Ai and totally destroyed it, doing to Ai and its king as he done to Jericho and its king, and that the people of Gibeon had made a treaty of peace with Israel and had become their allies. He and his people were very much alarmed at this because Gibeon was an important city. We're going to learn some cool things about Gibeon here. Like one of the royal cities. It was larger than Ai, and all its men were good fighters. That's interesting, isn't it? They had all the things lined up, but instead they choose to deceive and get on the right side. Who, from our vantage point. Come up and help us see where we're at. So Adonizedek, king, verse 3, king of Jerusalem, appealed to Hoham, king of Hebron, Piram, king of Jarmuth, Japhia, king of Lachish, and Debir, king of Eglon. Come up and help me attack Gibeon, he said, because it has made peace with Joshua and the Israelites. Then the 5 kings of the Amorites and the kings of all those places we just read, we'll do it again, they joined forces. They moved up with all the troops and took up position against Gibeon and attacked it. Quite possibly the most encouraging, and this chokes me up every time I read this verse, and it's so crazy. One of the most moving verses in all of what we're reading today is right here in verse 6. Gibeonites sent word to Joshua in the camp of Gilgal. Do not abandon your servants. Come up to us quickly and save us. Help us, because the Amorite kings from the hill country have joined forces against us. We have to make an observation here. Joshua's very name means Yahweh will save. Isn't it incredibly encouraging that 5 kings and all of their armies and all of their people came up against Gibeon, and they were certain to be destroyed? What it must have looked like, the Israelites are going to come get us. Now we have peace with them. We've crossed over, we switched sides, and now all these people are coming against us. But they have peace on personal. They call out to Joshua, save us. Is that incredible? Because just like that, Jesus is our Joshua, because Jesus is Yahweh, and he did save, right? When we get into these situations, it doesn't matter if the whole world is against us. That's what it looked like to the people in Gibeon. It doesn't matter if the whole world is against us. We get to call on our Joshua, our Jesus, and he's promised to save us. Isn't that the most encouraging thing? And I love how beautiful this is here. And so it goes on and said, and so what did Joshua do? They marched up from Gilgal with his entire army, including all the best fighting men. He didn't just take some, he took the best. These are our people. They're under our protection. They get our best. The Lord said to Joshua, don't be afraid of them. Who? Don't be afraid of who? Not the Gibeonites. Don't be afraid of the 5 kings and all their people. I have given them into your hand. Not one of them will be able to withstand you. Another observation. Joshua doesn't have the knowledge of what's about to, how this is going to go down. He probably gave that habit up, thinking, okay, we're going to go in there, we will cause the bloodshed. Probably gave that up when the wall did the work. You know, God did the wall of Jericho. Whenever the Lord does all this work and fighting for you, it's really a whole lot less about what you're contributing to that other than your obedience, right? Your belief and faith. So Joshua probably doesn't have a good idea of how this is going to go down. It's fascinating. Listen to this. Don't be afraid of them, I've given to you. Verse 9. Listen to when they marched. After an all-night march from Gilgal, Joshua took them by surprise. The Lord threw them into confusion. Who? Not Joshua, not the Gibeonites, not the army, the Lord. We've seen what happens when God doesn't fight for you. Take a listen to what happens when God does fight for you. The Lord threw them into confusion before Israel. So Joshua and the Israelites defeated them completely at Gibeon. Israel pursued them along the road up to Beth-horon and cut them down all the way to Azekah and Magiddo. As they fled before Israel on the road down from Beth-horon and Azekah, the Lord, listen to this, hurled large hailstones down on them, and more of them died from the hail than were killed by the swords of the Israelites. On that day, verse 12, the Lord gave the Amorites over to Israel. Joshua said to the Lord in the presence of Israel, sun, stand still over Gibeon, and moon over the valley of Ajalon. Good enough. 13, so the sun stood still and the moon stopped till the nations avenged itself on its enemies, as it's written in the book of Jashar. So let's make a couple observations here. The Lord strategically sent hailstones to hit people and kill them. Anybody want to go toss that out as the current Christian message? If you're against God and his message, watch out for the hail. We have this saying, you're going to be struck by lightning. Is that really that far off? I was so intrigued by this because I went and I was reminded of Job 38. And in Job 38, there are a couple verses when God's like leveling Job. If you've ever read the book of Job, it is such a letdown because it's like, no, poor guy. No, God has zero tolerance for this. He's like, Job. He's like talking, do you know the depths of the sea? He goes into all this stuff, and then he says this interesting thing. Job, have you been in the storehouse of snow or hell? Saying, oh, wow, so God has a storehouse of snow and hell. That's one thing. But you know what the next verse after that says? Which I reserve for times of war. Does that bother anybody? I mean, don't raise your hand, but we got a lot of people that pack heat in your house because you want to shoot somebody if they're going to come in, right? We live in Arkansas and basically Oklahoma, and I know there's a lot of gun-carrying people. Be on your up and up because someone might shoot you, okay? Here's the deal. You have that gun because you're prepared for battle. God has a storehouse of snow and hail reserved for times of war. This was time of war, and he's like, oh yeah, I got it. This is crazy. Yeah, God loves us, but he's also just, right? Why in the world were Joshua and the Gibeonites and the Israelites, what were they thinking? Did they freeze? Did they try to dodge the hail? No, they didn't have to. They didn't have to worry about it because God is so good. When he fights for us, he can target exactly what needs to be targeted, and he can save exactly what needs to be saved. Can you hear that? Can you receive that for your life today? Can you walk into Monday, tomorrow, knowing that God is going to protect you, even if the hailstone hits right there, you're good? You can trust his justice and his goodness and praise God for that. How crazy this must have been for these people, watching this take place. Let's move on. The sun stands still. It stopped. A lot of people do sermons called Joshua's Long Day. It's interesting. Full 23, 24 hours is what most commentators agree is what happened. Probably what happened is the earth just kind of stopped rotating and the sun, it looked like it stayed still, right? We can take this literal, or we can explain it away. We didn't really mean that. But literally speaking, Joshua says, we need more light so we can conquer what's in front of us. And God's like, not a problem. You got this. So can you imagine being the enemy? At least it's about to get dark. At least it's about to get, what is going on? At least it's about to get dark. It should have been dark 5 hours ago. It's still light. What happens when God fights for you? He has the arsenal that he will send at the exact time and hit the exact thing it needs to hit, and he will also shed light on everything that needs light as long as it needs light. Isn't that encouraging, friends? That's our God. He is the one. We get to serve him. We get to call him Dad. He is that. If you want to be a cool reminder of who you are in relation to who God is, go ahead and chew on Job 38. Just that. It'll help you. It'll feel like a curse, but it'll help you. So here's what happens. Just because Joshua asked, God did it. The sun stopped in the middle of the sky and delayed going down about a full day. Holy, that's crazy. There has never been a day like it before or since. A day when the Lord listened to a human being. Is that so crazy? Just shortly before, Joshua failed to inquire of God, to hear from God, and made a mistake. And in the middle of this, God says, you know how good I am to you, Joshua? I'm going to listen to your voice. Why? Because he hadn't harbored sin in his heart. Because he got rid of the things that were devoted to destruction. And it's not just Joshua that gets that. We get that. God wants to hear from us. But I think so often we get so self-attuned to our sin that we become immune to it, and we fail to oversee our sin at the expense of seeing the justice of God. I think we're in touch with our sin. Let's not be so in touch with our sin. Let's get in touch with the justice of God. And I think the latter will impact the former. That's what we see playing out here. And then Joshua returned with all Israel to camp at Gilgal. All right, now just a few verses and we're going to make it. Verse 16. Now the 5 kings had fled and hidden in the cave of Magada. I would say so. Why didn't God hit them with hailstones? This is going to get ugly. To me, it would have been better if they'd all just been wiped out. Verse 17, when Joshua was told that the 5 kings had been found hiding in a cave at Makkedah, all of a sudden their allegiance and alliance with each other led them to hide in a cave. Right? Our sin makes us want to hide in the dark places. Doesn't it? Probably wanted to get in the cave because they saw the hail. They saw it wipe out their people. Let's hide in the cave. Again, Job 38 says there's no place, including caves, that God has not been. He said, roll large rocks up on the mouth of the cave and post some men there to guard it. But don't stop. Pursue your enemies, attack them from the rear, and don't let them reach their cities. for the Lord your God is giving them into your hand. So Joshua and the Israelites defeated them completely, but a few survivors managed to reach their fortified cities. The whole army then returned safely to Joshua at the camp of Makkedah, and no one uttered a word against Israel. I would say not. Joshua said, "Open the mouth of the cave and bring those 5 kings out to me." We have a just God. So they brought the 5 kings out of the cave, the kings of Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon. When they had brought these kings to Joshua, he summoned all the men of Israel and said to the army commanders who had come with him, "Come here." It's crazy. "Put your feet on their necks of these kings." So they came forward and placed their feet on their necks. Verse 25, Joshua said to them, "Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. Be strong and courageous. This is what the Lord will do to all the enemies you're going to fight." Then Joshua put the kings to death and exposed their bodies on 5 poles, and they were left hanging on the poles until evening. We have a just God. At sunset, Joshua gave the order, and they took them down from the poles, threw them into the cave they had been hiding. At the mouth of the cave, they placed large rocks, which are there to this day, the day of the writing. It's fitting for them to be thrown back into that dark cave, because without confessing our sin that's in the dark, we will die in sin. And they ended up getting to experience that. So what do we do with what's before us today? Number one is we got to inquire. God, I don't like this whole hanging bodies on poles for everybody to see. I don't like this hailstone rolling out of the sky, killing certain people and sparing others. I don't like the way it looks like you don't care for all people. That doesn't seem right. So what do we do in light of this? We have to trust the justice of God, that He knows so much better than we know. So kind of in closing here, I appreciate you guys traveling along verse by verse scripture today. Pray the Lord has spoke through His word to your heart. But as a takeaway this morning, some areas of deception in your life. Remember, the enemy deceives us, other people deceive us, and we deceive ourselves. Notice I did not ask that or phrase that. Do you have deception? I didn't say that. You have deception, I promise. What are some areas of deception that are in your life that you need to place in the light of God? Then this other thing, Joshua and the people were completely walking by sight. We know, because we have the rest of God's word, it says we are not to live or walk by sight, but by faith. In Romans chapter 14, it even goes on to say anything done apart from faith is sin. So I've been chewing on this as part of application from my own life, and I just want to present it to you, family. Is what does it really truly mean to walk by faith? Does it mean to walk out there with blinders on, just hoping things fall together? Looking for signs to see if God's moving this way or that way? I don't think that's it at all. Because Joshua and the people were completely fooled because all of it looked so good and so convincing. Can I just challenge all of us here? There is a message floating around out there that looks good and convincing, but has nothing to do with the God of heaven who we are studying about today. But how do we operate in light of that? We have to walk by faith. And what does that mean? We don't have the signs. We don't get the tip-off points. What we do is we say, God, I don't understand. I don't see, but I trust you. And that's not a one-time hit. That's every second of every day inquiring of the Lord, God, what do you have for me in this? Can I ask you to do something along with me? I'm doing this. Can we do this together? Inquire of the Lord often and follow in obedience of what He says. Because He speaks to us. He wants to. We certainly don't want to be on the judgment side of God. It's rough. But through Jesus, we're on the same side, right? But even though we have a hope and a future in heaven, we have problems right now. God cares about every single one of those problems we experience. We just simply have to ask him, what's going on here? Can I hear from you in this? And then we trust what he says. It's also important, too. You need to be in community. If you're not in a community group, we call them gospel communities here at New Heights. If you're not in community, you're kind of on your own a little bit. You need people around you to help you be able to understand what inquiring of the Lord will reveal. You don't have to do it by yourself. You need to be with people. Take that as a challenge, an invitation. I can help you get connected in one of those. I'm going to ask the band to come on up. We're going to have the time. Just want you to kind of think through and kind of set it in the Word. We just read through the principles there. I'm sure the Lord spoke things to you that I didn't bring up, and that's hopefully the case. But as we're there, simply during this time, I would ask you to inquire of the Lord. Maybe it's simply, God, what do you want to talk to me about? What is it that I'm not really open to hearing from you? It's a dangerous thing to walk out things without the full knowledge that that's what God wants you to do. It makes a mess, and it doesn't just impact me or you. It impacts everybody's sin just like that. Inquire of God is justice. Let him meet you there. It's scary and weird, but good. So here at New Heights every Sunday during this time is a time you can just pray where you are. You can pray with somebody near you. What I would love is if the Lord's speaking to you about something and you need to go talk to somebody about what the Lord's speaking to you, go do that during this time. Encourage somebody. Pray with somebody. In a little bit, God, opportunity for communion. That's only for people who have surrendered completely to Jesus, and to remember the sacrifice that we are not under this wrathful judgment of God. As followers of Jesus, we don't have to endure that. We get to remember that sacrifice he made in communion. If you're unsure, if you're a follower of Jesus, don't take communion. Don't do that. Don't follow the pressure because everyone around you is doing that. Do that as you examine your heart. If it's right. You may just want to sit here and worship. It's okay. You may want to hop up and leave. It's okay too. It's non-formal time. You may not get another chance like this until next week, right? It's quiet moment. Just inquire of the Lord. Let him speak. There's a cloud here. We want to hear together. Perhaps he'll speak. Lord, thank you for your word. God, thank you that it's sufficient. Minus of our best effort to make it make sense. God, you do that. So thank you for that. Lord, I pray as a body here at New Heights this morning, more than that, as a fellowship, the body of believers, as we inquire of you, Lord, will you speak to us? I pray for a unified message from you on how we are supposed to live. Speak to us clearly. Lord, you want to be inquired of. So I pray that we'll come before you boldly and listen